Okay, so there was a tweet the other day. Also, I just ratioed the shit out of Now today. You will need to see
Poor
it.
Robin.
So he tried to ratio me, Chad, and you already know what happened. So right
Poor
here.
Robin.
So
Poor
Heels
Robin.
tweeted, this is bad. Not even 1K guilds have down Mythic Sylvanas. Why do we put so much effort into Mythic difficulty if the player base isn't playing it? These numbers are huge. Get rid of Mythic
What was this
Raiding.
tweet? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. This is bad. Not even 1,000 guilds have down Mythic Sylvanas. Why do we put so much effort into Mythic difficulty if the player base isn't playing it? These numbers are huge. Get rid of Mythic Raiding. Or at least get rid of the 20% requirement. I mean... that's a bad take. That's a bad take. I think WoW's had more problems than Mythic Raiding. And also getting rid of... Cutting content out when your game's not doing particularly well is never really a good idea. The 20% requirement... there is an argument to be made here, but I mean, WoW just is... It just doesn't work if you want it balanced. As much as I've been a big supporter of 10-man for a little while. Not a big supporter. It is more fun, unquestionably. 10-man or something is more fun. If in general, for a lot of players. Like, I like 20. I like larger raids. This is possible, but it's really hard. And Blizzard has failed at this before. They tried to do this, and it did not work. You don't just cut... I don't get these guys who are like, oh... Not a lot of people do that. Just cut it out. And be like, okay. Like, why? How does that help you?
That's the reason why people kind of popped off at this tweet. It has more comments than likes. Or at least get rid of the 20-person requirement. A lot of people who responded to this did not acknowledge the fact that he said, or at least get rid of the 20-person requirement. So I want to talk about that today and talk about the prospects of having less people involved in a WoW raid. I've actually thought about this a lot. And just before he shows this, this is kind of weird information, by the way. First of all, Nathria was out almost twice the amount of time that Sanctum has been out now. And the numbers are like twice as much. Yeah, I don't agree with the take at all, but I think it's worth bringing up a conversation because there's a lot of people who want to raid in smaller sizes in WoW. But yeah, these stats don't, is like, it's not really, it's kind of misleading because, you know.
You know what these kind of stats remind me of? They're dumb fucking posts that you see all the time on certain websites. Comparing how long a boss remained unkilled, ergo which boss is hardest. And they have like Cthulhu on there that was broken. Or they have Kill Jaden on there that was broken. Like, they have all these broke-ass bosses that were all bosses that were released like at the same time, but they were like 3 tiers ahead, right? You know what I mean? So like the guild had to go through like 3 other tiers before they even started the raid that had that boss in it, and like Illidan's listed as one of the hardest bosses. Like, that's so fucking stupid. Like, that's obviously not the case. Illidan just isn't that hard, but it was out for ages. You know what I mean? It was out and available. Cthulhu always pops up on there. Cthulhu is dog shit easy. Like, Cthulhu is crazy easy, but they put it on there as one of the hardest bosses ever because they just don't understand it. And, bad number 10.
And first of all, a lot of people stopped playing this patch, nothing to do with the raid. Also, this raid is easier than last raid. Also, it's at 2 different time frames, which means, like, comparing these 2 numbers really doesn't make sense. There's, like, so many things different about them. Either way, I wrote no to it. I looked at this yesterday, and I'm like, well, that seemed kind of like an edgy no. So I'll elaborate, because, you know, I don't know. I don't want to make this guy feel bad. You know, I mean, he just has an opinion, right? Here's the deal. People have mentioned this for a while. What to do about raiding in WoW at 20 players.
I said this in Max's stream the other day. Do you guys not agree Max is kind of turning into a bit of a Guido with the shell suit and the backwards hat? I'm just saying, there's a Jersey Shore look coming, Max. You keep commenting about my hair. I'm just saying, there's a bit of a...
Because I think other games have been successful running lower. In fact, I mean, 2 of the MMOs people have been playing a lot recently, Lost Ark on the beta and Final Fantasy, both of them have like 8-man raids. Both of them also have larger sized raids, but like the competitive raids in Final Fantasy are 8-man, and I believe most of the raid content in Lost Ark is 8-man. So it's like, well, maybe WoW, I mean, a long time ago, obviously, famously, WoW had a 10 and 25-man, condensed them into a 20, and that's just kind of where they've gone since then. That actually improved raid content a lot. Raid content being 20-man for a while made the tuning and balance between encounters so good. Back in the day when there was 10 and 25-man, there would be bosses that were randomly way easier than the other one. 10-man was generally easier. Since they've made Mythic, raid content has only gotten better. So.
That's why I point something out here that's never really taken into account is Blizzard half-arsed 10 and 25-man. Which has made me reflect on my... I famously say that, like, they can never do 10-man again in World of Warcraft because the classes are so much... You can't compare Final Fantasy and WoW in this regard, in my opinion. Their classes and the way the game works are just so different. And they cause so many... No, this isn't just about class balance, but the uniqueness and the variety you could do with a WoW spec is so much more than you can do in Final Fantasy because of the singular style of it, right? You can't mess around with your talents with a black mage or whatever. So they have a much easier time in Final Fantasy sorting that stuff out, which they decided from the beginning and was a really good choice for them. It was a really good choice. However, I personally prefer the World of Warcraft style, where we do have that variety. I love making those choices. I love having flexibility with my character. I love all that kind of stuff. But you can argue at the same time, Final Fantasy has that flexibility because you could just change class. Right? You could just swap over and play a different class. You're like, that's a huge amount of flexibility. And you can do that onto any class you want to play. With the same character, you can just be like, well, I'm going to be a fucking tank now, and I'm going to be a healer, and I'm going to do this and that. But when it comes to filling slots in raids, WoW has a much more difficult time with that. The problem is, when they did try and do 10 and 25, and they tried to do it, like, equal, which was like Wrath of the Lich King when they tried to do that, they really, and Cataclysm, they really half-arsed it. And it wasn't a case that it was, like, slightly out. They just left, straight up, 25-man numbers in the 10-man. And just left it like that for months. Like, ridiculous decisions like that. And it's not like... And it does come across like they were just randomly harder. But it wasn't just random. It was just that they half-arsed the fucking system so badly that it just made no sense. And then they did the weird decision to, like, share achievements and stuff across the board. And in some cases, in a lot of cases, they gave 25-man better loot because it was harder to organize a 25-man. And then you had 10-mans coming in and the 25-man guilds coming in and sweeping all the 10-mans. So all the 10-man guilds felt shit on as well. I mean, I don't know if I've seen it done properly. That's my problem with it. I don't know if I've actually seen them try and do it properly. My brain tells me they can't do it properly, just based on how class stacking works. But at the same time, when they did implement it, it was really half-arsed, and it sucked. To the point where 10-man's... Like, one of the hardest bosses you had to deal with in 10-man was Halphus Wormbreaker Heroic, which is so stupid. Because it was the easiest fight in the world with 25-man. It was like something that people pugged on week 1 to kill. And then on 10-man, it was just so goddamn hard. It was crazy. You had that... And then you get to the next boss, which would have been Valiona and Thralian. And then you find out that for some reason, even though you can only send one person to the Shadow Realm, and I know this might be a little bit technical for anybody who's not done this fight or doesn't know what I'm talking about, but essentially you had to send people into a Shadow Realm to deal with some orbs. They kept the health of the numbers they had to kill down there, the same as the 25-man one, despite the fact in 25 you could send 5 players downstairs. I mean, why would you do that? Like, yeah, so you overcame this massive obstacle of Halphus Wormbreaker, only to get to the very next boss and be like, what? You could send, like, healers and shit downstairs. Like, so 25-man's sending, like, 4 DPS, 1 healer. And in 10-man, you could send a rogue. And it had to specifically be a rogue. They were the only person who could possibly survive. And they had to put out the same damage as 4 players. Ugh.
So, I think Mythic was a very good thing for the game. If I were to make a new game in 2021, 2022, 2025, if I was going to make a new game, I would have the raid size be smaller than 20. The problem with 20-man raiding, it's people point to the wrong things all the time. They point to just a lot of the issues with it that aren't the core problem. The core problem is this. It's a lot easier to get 10 people together that you have similar interests with, have the same passion level for the game, same skill level. Having skill parity in a group is very, very, very important. No one likes raiding with that one person who's, like, not quite at the group's level because you notice that they're, like, holding you back. And being that person sucks. Being that person really sucks. Because you know, you feel bad. You're trying your best, right? It just doesn't work. So like so that being said, both of those things happen in 10 and 20 mans, except in 20 it's just a lot more likely because there's just more people involved. The way that I've tried to describe it to people is having a really good working atmosphere in a 20-man raid is like, imagine, especially going for world first, imagine a business environment. So like any business environment you guys work in at a 9 to 5 or just anywhere. And imagine involving 20 people in a group project that they're all super passionate about, right? It sounds like hell, really, because it's just a lot of people. 10 is so much more reasonable, and even 10 kind of sounds...
Dude, we couldn't even get like 3-person high school projects working, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm glad Max has this take, because I imagine it's the same for him as it was for us, is that your viewer's perspective is skewed if you have a really good group of 20 people. And even then it's hard. Like Limit and Echo, and you know, the rest of the top guilds generally have an environment which is filled with people who are very, very passionate about a very specific niche thing and are usually pretty good. It's really hard to account as you move further down the roster where you're incorporating more people who are less passionate, less dedicated, less skillful, and you have to account for more of those people being in your group. If you want to get how many times do we see on drama? It's like 20 man. It's like we have like 10 really focused, really passionate, great players. And in my experience, the actual super best players of World of Warcraft are not in the top guilds. Like there's some there, but there is a lot of extremely good players who just can't contribute to the world first race and all that kind of stuff, and they exist in other places. But they have to fill their roster with people who couldn't quite get up to this level, couldn't get up to that level. And they end up recruiting 5 or 6 players. I'm sure you guys have been through this, who've ever raided in WoW, is you've experienced recruiting like 5 or 6 people, and they're just like, oh my fucking god, these guys are terrible. And you just want to get rid of them, and you recycle them, and you rehash them over and over again. And you go round and round the circle, and you just constantly like have this revolving door. And we call it churn, but the churn as you move further down the skill level is way higher. Or you end up just keeping people, and your good players leave. And there's your churn. Your churn is either at the top or the bottom. And there's people going who are shit. If you're raid leaders, like you are 2 shits. Unfortunately, it's dragging the whole team down, and you have to leave, and we can't help you. We've tried to help you, but we can't. You're just not getting this for whatever reason. Or your good players are like, why are we carrying these motherfuckers? And they have to leave. And they move to the higher guilds, right? So, I mean, it happens all the goddamn time, constantly. And it's really hard, and I'm sure it's impossible for Max, even with a pugging and stuff like that. And it's impossible for me to really account what that environment's like day to day, certainly for a months-long period. But you have to account for that, because it happens all the time.
Sounds like hell, but that's kind of the thing. Like, WoW raiding's pretty special. Raiding in MMOs is pretty special. If you can get the right group, it's really fun for you. But the problem is, getting 20 people is just much harder than it is getting 10. So, if I were making a new game, I would do that. However, I would not...
What would you make it? What would you make it? If you were making a new game right now, an MMO, what would be your idyllic raid size be? Because we're at the point where people are asking for, like, solo... I mean, this is such a vague question, because it's like, well, how many classes do you have? How unique are those classes? Do you have, like, extra special cooldowns? Like, does one class bring Bloodlust? Well, they have a raid spot, right? You know, or does one class bring Limit Break or whatever? Everything around 10, 8, 10, or maybe 15. I would prefer 10. For the hardest content. For the hardest content, I would certainly prefer 10. I think. I would prefer 10. I feel like 8, like, I like 8 in FF, but if you've got an active group of people, there's so many people left out. All the time. I mean, but if I haven't pushed the hardest content, so I'm a little wary on that. Like, for the hardest content, I'm not going to take, like, Raven, obviously. We're not taking Vappies. You know, there's fat that could be trimmed. You've got to, you know, you've really got to work on that. You know what I mean? That's what happens. When you've got to drop that raid size, you can really start, you know, trimming off that excess and make it into the beautiful shape you want it to be. Not all classes would be included. Well, this is why it's such a vague question, right? Because it's like, well, how do your classes work? How many have you got? How many variations of them have you got? And how unique are those things? Like, it's not just a case of put a number on it, right? It's 8, it's 10, it's 12. You really have to bear in mind what is this infrastructure of the game. But that also dictates your infrastructure. If you're going to say something like, we want our raid sizes to be like 10, you really don't want more than like 14 classes or something like that, because that, and to be super unique, and then you really have to consider their individual, what is their uniqueness they're bringing to the raid, combat reses, all that kind of stuff, because it really starts to mess with the dynamic like heavily. It's a very difficult balance to achieve.
Reduce the size of WoW's current raids, and I think the problems can be solved in other ways. First of all, WoW has too many classes and specs, and they all are way too unique. There's already a situation right now in 20-man raids where people feel like certain classes are required to progress in the raid. That would only become more of a problem with 10-mans. And again, I do not want to hear, well, it just needs to be better on WoW to balance then. WoW's balancing situation is impossibly hard compared to other games. We've talked about it a million times. And I think to make it easier, they would have to make more streamlined, straightforward, like boss damage types. So less funnel, 1 target, 2 target, 3 target, burst, sustained. And you'd have to streamline that and homogenize it. I don't think that would be good for the game. And because of that, a bunch of different classes and specs in this game have different advantages to them. And I think it's really cool to like kind of mix and match them and do that. I also think for a long time, even opposed to like the public opinion, WoW's balance has been good. I did a video about this recently, so I won't like repeat that. But like a lot of the classes that are...
What? What's it like? I haven't checked in months. Hold on. Have they nailed it? Because they're about to introduce double Legos and things. Checking. They might have. They tend to get... They might have managed to get it pretty goddamn close. Give me some data. I need data. It's not bad. This is a very vague look. I haven't compared things like AoE and single target, but... That's not bad. That's not bad at all. Couple of outliers, but that's not bad. Well, let's be careful about burying into this, because then we really do have to dig down into styles of encounter. That's not bad at all. No, this is all bosses aggregate. This is all bosses aggregated. That's actually not bad. Oh, I tell you what. Let me screenshot this. Let me screenshot this. I want to see what this is like in 9.2 when they introduce double Legos and tier sets. I want to remember this. That isn't bad. That's actually very good. That is actually very, very good. Yeah, you see, this is the mentality. It's like, oh, the hunters are at the bottom. They're like 4% away, played at the 95th percentile. That's fine. That's really fine. Okay? That's totally fine. It really is. That is absolutely fine. They're like 4% away from being the top 1 or 2. Do you know what I mean? That's totally fine. It is. That is absolutely fine.
Lower on single target have massive benefits other places and are sometimes the highest AoE classes. They have to like try to find a way to balance that, and it's never been perfect. There's always been outliers, but at least currently it's actually pretty balanced relative to the past. In a 10-man, that would be way more stuck out. You would find people basically being forced to main classes. I think that happens in 20-mans. It shouldn't happen.
It happened before.
And you can get away with not doing it in 20. You probably couldn't in 10.
That's
there
what
would be
happened in the
required
past.
classes and
Your 10
expansions
slots
based on the
were
balance.
completely
And again,
dictated.
like in classes, games like Final Fantasy, great raid content, 8 people, there are half the amount of jobs in that game that there are specs in WoW. People already complain if their classes aren't included in like a normal 20-man raid comp, because like no matter what the people at the top do, people will like copy that, right? And they'll want that for their team. It would be a huge problem in WoW in 10. That being said, I think you can keep the 20-man raid, or even if you want to reduce it to like, I don't know, like 16 or something, that works too. I'm not like just something close to 20. I just think 10 won't work in WoW anymore, and I don't think 2 group sizes of the same difficulty mode is good either. So I'm gonna propose 2 options, kind of. I do think it needs to be fixed. I think they should focus on 3 things first. I think keep 20-man rating. I think reducing 20-man from 20-man would affect the content too much in a negative way. But I think they need to make it easier for guilds to beat the roster boss. So many people during Classic WoW was the first time this happened. Classic came out, and if you start losing players, you start having to recruit basically anyone.
Why do they do that thing? That Hall of Fame thing hasn't worked, right? Because there's just no alliance guilds. So it takes literally months. I mean, obviously there's alliance in Oceanic and things like that, but the Hall of Fame thing, I think it was a good idea. Like, it was a good idea, but it's not worked, right? The numbers just don't back it up. Like, I don't know what the specific numbers are for this this tier. I don't know if I can check, actually. Like, how long did it take the Hall of Fame to open from when the Horde completed it? Yeah, it did them no favors. Like, I get the idea. The idea was pretty solid, but what was the difference? Can I Google this? I'm not sure where I can find that information at a glance. Sanctum of Domination. Hall, Cross-Realm Mythic. The Alliance Hall of Fame is now full. Okay, this Icy Veins might be able to help us out here. If Icy Veins have got it. The Alliance Sanctum of Domination Mythic Hall of Fame is now full, which means Cross-Realm Mythic is now open. 100 slides from China. Okay, so August 14th is when the Horde did it. And it took till September 21st for the Alliance. That's not terrible, but it's not ideal because it really shows the difference. Like, this is the problem, right? By then, how many Horde guilds have done it? Like, if I take a quick look here over at WoW Progress. Go away. Like, the red is pretty ridiculous at this point, right? Compared to the blue. It's pretty ridiculous on every single page. Like one or two pages like that. I think it should just be when 100's in there.
The guild's morale goes down, people start missing raids. It's a problem. The more people you add to a raid group, the harder it is to consistently play at the same time. So when times in WoW where the player base has been down, like now or when Classic came out, it actually ravages guilds. But Blizzard can fix that. You can keep the same 20-man environment and add 3 things. Cross-realm raiding. It needs to be available from the jump. It would be infinitely easier to fill your group with someone if you weren't just restricted to your realms. I raid on Illidan. Very easy to find people on Illidan. Outside of Illidan, outside of Area 52,
I totally agree
outside
with
of a few
that.
other
Especially
realms,
now
it is not easy.
Numbers are down.
Okay? So guilds actually end up not being able to play the game because people aren't there. That's bad. You can solve that.
What is the worst realm in WoW right now? Like, anybody know? Anybody on that realm? Realms US. Jesus Christ. Is this amount of players or guilds? There's no way like Area 52 has 79 alliance players, right? There's no way, right? It's the amount of players who have logged with some sort of log. Oh god, so that is pretty terrible. Jesus. Yeah. I mean, there's only like 6 or 7 servers you would want to be on. Right? Like, as soon as you're not on those like 6 or 7 servers, and that's on the Horde side, you're pretty dicked. Like, your opportunities are so low, and it just gets worse from then. How is it on the Alliance? It's like 4? This is a quick glance, but it's like 4. And after that, it gets really fucking bad. Let's check the EU. Yeah. Slightly better over on the EU side. One of the biggest debates ever is when you log in and they try and put you on like a medium pop realm. And you're like, bro. That's the worst advice ever. Oh, what's going on in Eridar? Fuck, man. Who is this hero? Who is this fucking legend? It'll happen. This is Copium. This is Captain Copium. Any day now. Any day. I'm not 100% how you interpret this data, but any day. Probably an alt, yeah. Holding on to his player house. What does the auction house look like on Eridar Alliance? Can anybody check? I'm kind of really curious. What does the auction house look like for the Eridar Alliance? Has anyone got a character over there? Can just have a quick look. See what that auction house looks like. Jesus fuck. Yeah, they're cross-faction. That's true. That's true. The auction house is cross-faction. How would you check? In fact, most of this stuff is cross-faction besides Mythic Raiding, right? You can't really like queue for a dungeon and wait forever.
Immediately by having cross-realm raiding. Cross-realm raiding would not affect the game negatively in any way. The fact that it's just arbitrarily tied to Alliance Hall of Fame filling up months after the Horde one is ridiculous. It just shouldn't be that way. There's no reason for it not to be there from the jump. Other games have that. It's objectively good for the game. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is cross-faction raiding. Alliance raid guilds, raids, and raiders play an entirely different game than Horde. There are infinitely less people available to help you on Alliance than there are Horde. We've talked about this a lot before. Ian kind of mentioned it in a previous interview. I think they're looking into it. It's looking promising. I think it needs to happen. Half of my guild wants to be Alliance, but we can't go Alliance. I feel like it would actually even the faction balance more than anything else by just making it so you can raid any realm, any faction with anyone. You already do that in the lore. Why can't you do that in game? I'm not going to go into the huge faction thing. I just think something that should apply to it that would majorly fix the problem.
Question for the chat though, like how many of you WoW players or ex-WoW players or whatever play Horde just because that's where the raids are and you would much prefer to be Alliance? I do. I do. And like you're just Horde literally because that's where everybody is and that's how the game works, right? Like many of us, yeah, I would happily change to Alliance. Like we tried to convince the guild to swap, but ultimately the decision is like I mean there was talk of whether or not we had enough streamer privilege to get people to recruit on the Alliance. But ultimately, you're just fucked. Like, not only just, like, the opportunities to raid, but your auction house is way less, your resources are way less. It's just, jumping realms in order to farm certain things is way less. It's just, like, it's so much shitty. Don't you dare say no to Goblin Jump. I would happily, if I was still playing a Moonkin, I would happily be a Night Elf Druid. I hate trolls and Taurens. You guys know this. I constantly use Deviant Fish. The only thing I like on the Horde is Undead. That's it. I just like Undead. I would rather have a Night Elf Warrior. I would rather have Gnome Casters. Even just for a change of pace, man. A change of scenery. I have not visited Stormwind. I have visited the different data centers of Final Fantasy more times than I've visited Stormwind in the last decade. Unless it was for like a quest. But to actually visit that place, negative.
And number 3. Another huge problem that guilds cannot continue raiding through the week is after you have killed a few bosses, people on your realm cannot join your lockout without missing an opportunity to kill the first boss. Let's say you killed Terragru, Io the Jailer, and the 9, and you're progressing on Soul Render. Someone in the group finder is like, oh, well, I want to do Soul Render, but I can't because then I'll miss my chance to kill Terragru, Io the Jailer, and the 9 this week. Why? Why? Make Mythic lockouts the exact same as Heroic. Make it so if you kill Terragru...
Yeah, I'm still not sure why the Mythic ID lock's still a thing. It made sense a while ago, barely, like a scrape, but it doesn't make sense anymore. It really doesn't. And it sucks when you're... Because of the way the game works, and you've got to have like 24, 25 people for a 20-man raid. that those dudes just don't get their shit. So you end up like doing this weird system, especially with systems like the Guild Vault, where you're literally sitting people just to get people in to get kills so they can get their vaults up to a mythic level. Instead of being like, oh, okay, we did this, we're stopping. Now we can go and do, if we want, we can go back in and we can smash Shriekwing or whatever, and we can smash through this raid with the five or six people who didn't get any loot this week. Our friends, you know, our people who were literally sat there waiting to come and play, who are very good players. Or we have to put together the Scuff alt group, which barely any guilds can support a mythic alt group, certainly from week 1. Instead of just throwing a couple of hours to make sure we get like our guys geared up, you know, and get them their stuff, because why are they missing out? It's not really fair.
Aya the Jailer, you can still join some other, and the same thing works the other way, by the way. If a player kills Terragru in a pug, he can no longer join a group to do Aya the Jailer that wasn't his exact pug. That's a problem. Yes, there are downsides to this. Like, it could create some, like, it could make, like, Race to World First guilds do some unholy stuff, but it'll be after progression. I don't really know exactly what it'll be. But you know what? That's much less of a problem than the problem that already exists with people being unable to find people to join their raids to do bosses because they don't.
I only mock them there because the Race to World First guys will do the most degen shit in the world. No matter what it is. If it's there, they'll do it. They'll do it regardless of what it is. They'll do the most degen shit in the fucking world every single time. I mean, come on now. Come on now. It doesn't matter what it is. Everyone will follow. They don't. They don't. They don't. That's not the case. There aren't many guilds in the world who are doing like full male splits. You don't even have the resources outside of the Race to World First to put off to do things like that. You can't. Most people can't fill their raid with 25 hunters or whatever to get one guy a bow. You know what I mean? You really need the resources at the top for that.
Want to miss boss kills, or they already killed a meaningless boss and cannot join their raid. I promise you. So if they keep 20-man raids, which I actually firmly believe they should do, or even if they reduce it, there needs to be one raid size at the top, and it cannot be 2 again. That created too many problems, 10 and 25-man. But if they allow cross-faction raiding, cross-realm raiding from day 1 of a new raid coming out, and they allow mythic lockouts to just work like heroic ones, I think that would vastly improve guilds that exist right now ability to raid on a weekly basis. Without having to reduce the size. Because I really think that rating would be, the integrity and like how good rating is right now would be harmed by going back to 10-man, to be honest with you, in this game. Even though if I were to make a new game today, if I was consulting developers on making a new game, I would recommend that their raid size is no bigger than 10 for that exact reason. But WoW's, because it's been out for so long, and because there are so many classes and specs, and because there's so many combat types and amount of adds and types of damage you can do, and because there's a million specs that all do those things differently, you can't reduce the size because it's just going to disclude so many classes from the game. So yeah, so that's basically it. That's my TED talk on WoW rating.
That's hot, Matt. That's hot shit. Whoa! Calm down. That's hot.